So, Bill?
We're still in troubled waters, but less so now that the next guest is here.
Well, before we get to that, I know you've got a lot of yard work to do in the near future.
Yeah. Yesterday was a busy day between mowing.
I'm glad you woke up.
Mowing and putting mulch down and also putting a pump in the water. Mike Lang came over and gave me a hand with a pump last night. So we have it in the water, but it's not working.
Well, you could have saved yourself a lot of energy on that one.
Yeah, we have a problem. We'll get it fixed, though.
Yeah, I'm envious of the network of contacts that you have who come and work on your campground.
Wonderful people they are. I survived because of them. They're great people.
I was thinking of you this weekend. I was watching the golf tournament. I guess it was in Florida. I don't remember the name of the tournament or where it was specifically, other than the fact that there were alligators in the waters around the golf tournament. And then they showed the one fairway, and there were alligators up on the grass. There was the grass outside the water. Then there was like a little ditch. Didn't seem big enough to me. And then there was the fairway, and there were about 4 gators there sunning themselves. And I thought, that's the Admiral. He's got those around his moats to keep the the compound safe.
Keep them out, yeah. Those alligators, you got to be careful with them. They look like they're very innocent, but they ain't. So I've had a couple of encounters with alligators.
I'd rather not. Our guest in this segment is Deborah Hammond. Deborah, of course, was the county administrator for many years.
A wonderful county administrator.
While you were the county commission president, or I guess you were council then, right?
Well, both. We started off the commission, then went to council. We went from 3 to 5, went to council, and then the wisdom was able to turn it back to commission again.
When her 9 to 5 working days ended, she eventually became an author and has now pumped out 27 books and working on number 28. Deborah, good morning. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I saw you around a lot in the last week or so.
I know.
Every time I went to eat lunch somewhere, there you were.
It's Tuesday, so I must be seeing Rob.
That's what I was
like 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah. So this is book number 28. What's it going to be called?
Book number 28 is called Death in a Perfect Village.
And as you were saying, the village was perfect until?
It's perfect until it isn't. in those beautiful, it harkens back to the beauty of Agatha Christie and Miss Marple, and the perfect English village and the secrets that it hides. Mm-hmm. Only in this case, it's in Scotland.
Scotland, I see.
Yes, about an hour from Inverness.
What has been the most popular venue for your 27 books that preceded this one? Most common?
The most popular book?
Country-wise, in terms of setting the books.
I see. Well, I would probably have to say the UK.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think people have a lot of interest in, well, particularly now with the Bridgerton series, of course. Yeah. The Regency era books that I have are very popular. The time travels are always popular, and 2 of those are set in England and then in the borders of Scotland. And the other is set in Martinsburg, so that makes that book very popular.
Mm-hmm. Your first book was called what?
In the Eye of the Storm.
And that I read that one, and we had you on right after that came out.
Yes.
And it should be said that when you read a Deborah Hammond book, it gets a little frisky in there sometimes.
Well, my view of this is the following. If you are fortunate enough in your life to have a little romance, mm-hmm. then you're fortunate indeed. So that's an element in all of my books.
Let it flow.
You said a little romance.
Well, it depends on the book.
Yeah.
Let's have a caveat there. It depends on the book.
The book that I think Rob's referring to, and I read as well,
the first.
It had this set in this beautiful cathedral in London. And I would say liberally you gave probably a paragraph and a half describing this cathedral. Went back to the ship where we had a little bit of romance, and it took the next 3 chapters describing the romance.
Oh, well, not quite that much.
Yeah, I embellished a little bit.
Just a little. But, there's the page-turner element.
Yeah, it is.
You always have to have a page-turner.
And cathedrals do not turn pages.
Well, I love cathedrals, but that doesn't mean everyone does. So,
So how long was there an author inside of you before the author came out?
Always. I have in my garage, which Bill's not real happy about. I have
The other Bill, by the way.
yes, the
Bill,
other
the
Bill,
husband. Yeah.
Bill the husband, Bill the beta reader.
Yeah.
I have spiral notebooks with story ideas. I mean, it just was always there.
And I'm curious, Rob, we were talking about before we went on air. Deborah worked with us in the county commission for 15, 20 years.
18 years.
18 years. During that time with these spiral notebooks, I'm sure a lot of things were recorded. So how much do they go from being real life county commissioners type of deal to embedded in one of our stories? Probably a lot.
You know, you have to think on it. It would have to be a political intrigue, because you and I are political nerds, but, you know, is the average reader necessarily a political nerd? So it would have to be a political intrigue. So it's in there.
Let the wheels turn. Is there of any of the books that you've written, have any of the characters been loosely based or shared anything in common with the Admiral?
Oh, with the Admiral? No. No.
I don't know if I feel good about that. I feel dejected.
Well, you wouldn't want to be one of my villains.
No, I would not
really
want to,
wouldn't
yeah.
want to be one
and
of my
I not
villains.
want to be one of your victims.
So, yeah. So,
How do you get?
I would like to be in one of the romance side.
He's Photoshop a new body in for him, though, if you don't mind.
Come on, Rob. That wasn't very nice.
Well, no offense, but you're 85. Same as I'm 62. Don't you want like a 25-year-old's body
How
instead?
could I take that any way other than be offensive?
I'm not that far behind you. So how do you get from the concept of, I got the book written, I got to find an editor, and I got to get it published? How do you do that?
well, I am very fortunate. I am an independent author, as they're called, indie author. So I work on the Amazon platform, and all of the book covers I actually design myself. I work with a company called Dreamstein, and you can download images. So I have an image in my mind of what characters look like. So then I try to find something, that is as close to my mind's eye of that person. And then, you want to have that pick-up capacity. You want someone to look at something and say, "Ooh, that looks really interesting." And that's the first part of the process of someone saying, "Ooh, that looks interesting." And then they start hearing about the story.
And then how do you get it ultimately published into market?
All of that is, again, through the Amazon platform. They have a means by which the books are uploaded, and then, the cover that I design is uploaded as well. And I also do all of my books in both paperback and Kindle versions. And Amazon has a great format that helps you with that.
Who edits the book start to finish?
I mentioned Beta Reader 1.
Bill.
Which is...
Not this Bill.
Not this Bill.
No.
Bill husband, Bill Hammond.
If you ever write a book in French, Bill's your guy because he studied French back in school.
You've heard that story. It's a bad story.
Yeah. I have worked with Mr. Stubblefield long enough to know his expertise in languages. So
That was put very professionally and nicely. You just got shredded very politely.
And I'm not bleeding at all. She's a master.
Very nice.
That's all I'm going to say.
Well done.
Beta Reader 1, Bill Hammond, and his famous red pen,
Yeah.
because he has one of those clicky pens. So he will sit in the living room with the clicky pen, and I'll hear the click, and I'm thinking, oh, he's found something. What did you find? Oh, no, I'm just clicking. So, that's the mind game going on. So I have to go to another room while he's doing that. And then a wonderful friend who was a former coworker, Pam Swartwood, who is absolutely astounding when it comes to finding things that I have looked at 27 times and didn't see. She's my second beta reader. And then I release on the world.
Is anywhere along the way, does Amazon ever say, to the process you go through, no, this is just not worthy of being published, don't? Or as long as you get it through where you're going to get through, it gets up there, and then let's go and see who buys it?
Well, they have a great thing when you're right to the very, very final piece of the puzzle, where they'll do like their version of a spell check. So, we've talked about a number of the books are set in Scotland. Well, I'm using Gaelic. So you can imagine, what the spell check is doing with the Gaelic. So these words will pop up of, this word is questionable, this word is questionable. And then the author can go through and say, no, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine.
You have an international readership. How do you gauge the number of readers and where they come from?
Actually, there is on the platform, there is a mechanism that you actually see the different markets because, of course, Amazon is worldwide. So it could be an Australian market, it could be a UK market, principally UK because the wonderful friends that I've made through the years on Twitter are predominantly in the UK.
What has been your best-selling book?
My best-selling book, probably, I'd have to come back to the Martinsburg time travel, Both Sides Now. That is very, very popular. It's interesting to me because I guess I've always looked at books that are, all over the world because I like learning about other countries. But I find that there are a lot of people who want to read a book about their community. And of course, in what I do with all of my books, in the notes at the end, I like people to understand the difference between the fact and the fiction. Mm-hmm. So I'll detail everything that was contained in the book that was factual in terms of the number of times that Martinsburg changed hands, for example, during the Civil War.
How many times was that?
37.
Yeah, I knew this. Yeah. A very high number.
Amazing. And also things like which I had not known previously. There was a referendum that was done in the state of Virginia at the time that Virginia was considering seceding from the Union. And the Eastern Panhandle, of course, voted against seceding. But we were part of the state, so
for a little while,
out we went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how many copies, if that's the best-selling one, about how many copies would that be?
Well, on average, I sell between 500 and 1,000 a year. Mm-hmm. So, Holly, just a guesstimate, maybe 300-400. Yeah, just a guess.
So if you are, let's say I tomorrow decide I want to publish my own book independently and I get it to market, what is a reasonable amount of books that I would sell that would be a typical number that I like? If everyone wants to sell 1 million books, right? Mm-hmm. But what's a normal first-time author, independent author kind of book sales number?
Well, it's going to, I hate to use the lawyer term, but it's going to depend. Mm-hmm. Because the only downside that I have experienced in being an independent author is you have to go out and find your audience. So you don't have a publishing company that's saying, we're going on a book tour and we're going here, there, and wherever. So you have to find your audience. So it's really going to depend on how many events you do in a given year and how you find that audience, either through social media or a combination of social media and actual live events.
What's a number that you're happy with when you put a new book out of the 27 books that are out? If you hit this number of books, well, that's pretty good. What's that number?
Actually, I would say if in a given year, 100 to 200 of that particular title, I would be very happy. Mm-hmm. I have books that, I've been doing this now for 11 years. It'll be officially 11 years in September. I have books that I sell today that, for example, my first book still sells very well. So it just depends on the interest of the person. I always say when someone comes to an event, I'll say, number one, do you enjoy reading? And if they say yes, then, I'll start talking about the different genres that I have. If they say no, I always sit there and say, bite my tongue, because it's difficult for me to have a concept of someone who doesn't read, because I'm just such an avid reader, and
Sure.
Everyone I know are avid readers. But then we sort of get down to, well, what genres do you enjoy? Mysteries are very, very popular.
Seem to be.
Yeah.
So when you're on Amazon doing this and someone goes and buys your first book, mm-hmm. where is that book physically coming from to be shipped to them?
It depends on where it was ordered, because I mentioned the different markets. So, for example, when I'm buying my books for events, you will click on, and there's 7 or 8 different markets of Amazon, and that means like for worldwide distribution. If someone is on the East Coast, for example, the books that I order come from Delaware. So it's going to depend on which Amazon location actually is closest to them and prints it and then distributes
So
it.
that's when someone orders the book then actually gets printed and sent to them. It's not
That's
sitting
correct.
in a warehouse where someone
No.
grabs it and puts it in an envelope.
That's the beauty of independent publishing, because you're not having a situation where there are 5,000 books sitting in a warehouse. They are printed as they're ordered.
Yeah, ready
Yeah,
to go.
Deborah, shifting gears to another media. Do you still remain on West Virginia Public Radio?
Oh, yes.
Board of Directors?
Yes, I am on the board of Friends of West Virginia PBS. That's one of my passions as well. And one of the things that I love so much about what I do is that I have the opportunity to give back not only to Berkeley County, but to the state. I mean, I feel that I have both contributed to the community and to the state, but I also want to give back to both the community and the state. So I continue on Eastern Panhandle Home Consortium, for example. I've been on that board since 2007. I work with United Way of the Eastern Panhandle and doing fundraising and special events, which reminds me the Little Black Dress event is coming up, in case you weren't aware of that, May 22nd. Also, I work with, we mentioned West Virginia PBS, very active with my local church. So I enjoy being able also to have the time to do those things.
Going back to public radio specifically, now a lot of that money is privately financed by individuals. Some comes from the state.
Yes.
Is there still some push to reduce or to eliminate that state funding?
Both state and federal is under a lot of scrutiny. So the board has continued to work with both our federal and our local legislators, trying to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Did any bills in this past legislation that would affect or impact public radio?
There was one piece of legislation that actually came from the governor's office that would have moved West Virginia PBS to tourism. And so that would have been a whole new piece of the puzzle. And as far as the most recent information I have, I do not believe that that was approved.
If it had been moved to tourism, what impact would that have had?
Well, we didn't know.
Yeah.
That was, that's always the unknown as to what's going to happen. And of course, the other thing about West Virginia PBS and all of the state PBS is you want that independent voice, and you don't want that independent voice to go away. So there's always concern about that.
The immediate effect, Bill, would have been during newscasts, tourists would have been walking through the studio, and you would have been, hi, how are you? Yeah, just doing some news. Yeah, I'll sign that later.
They do sound like let's come back to some of these other discussions in a second, but I want to make a statement about Deborah first, all kind of offline.
Sure.
Deborah left the county commission after being there for 18 years, doing an absolutely phenomenal job. Left there for reasons that I don't think had anything to do with merit. A lot of folks would have been discouraged. A lot of folks would have taken their anger out by saying things that made them feel good but would have had no real impact. Deborah did not. To the best of my knowledge, Deborah never said one sentence of casting dispersion toward anybody involved. That was a lady of character, Deborah, and I respected that. I've always respected you, but I respect you even more that the way you handled yourself during those very difficult times.
Well, I had worked for 31 years in local government, 10 years in Wilmington, North Carolina, 21 years here in the county, both as planning director and then as county administrator. And we know the cycles of politics, and we know that something that may appear to be a straight path suddenly has curves. So I guess my view has always been, to always stay professional and to always have a positive outlook, because literally, we joke about the next chapter, but literally the day that I retired, I took those 4 chapters that I had written when I lived in Wilmington of the first book, and I said, well, now you have the time. And that was March 5th. And by the middle of May, I had my first draft. So I said, yeah, I think you're supposed to do this.
Well, a positive approach to it. But again, I'll come back to the fact you could have taken a different road. You could have been vocally critical, and you chose not to. You did not throw anybody under the bus. You basically moved to a different chapter and did not really look behind.
And I think, our eyes are in the front and not in the back. Yeah. So you're always looking forward. Yeah.
Speaking of chapters, Christy Dunn wants to know what advice you can give for someone who is just starting out and wanting to write a book, their first one. What do you say?
I think that the best pieces of advice that I see by, the author community on all of social media is write as often and as much as you possibly can. Will that first draft be a phenomenal success? Probably not, because you have to go through edits. And I find frequently I can add as many as 10 pages just as I'm going through the editing, because I'm expanding on the story. You're getting things on a page and then you expand upon the story. The other thing is to read as much as possible, because every author that I know is also an avid reader. It's not about, I'm going to, take a story here, I'm going to take a story there. No, it's about seeing styles of various authors and then saying, okay, that's a genre I haven't explored. Let me see if I can play with that. So write as much as you possibly can. Read as much as you possibly can.
How do you find an honest person to tell you this is not good? Most people don't want to tell you that, no matter what you're whether it's writing or whatever else, music, whatever. How do you find the honest person who says you got to do better than this?
Well, I think I must have been really blessed with my beta readers, because they have no qualms.
They had no trouble telling you that, huh?
No qualms about saying, what did you do here? In fact, it was so funny when I did A Smuggled Heart, which is also set in Scotland. There's a scene where the wife of the main character had been kidnapped because he had a backstory. He was a smuggler before he married her and became more respectable. She had been kidnapped, so he and his whole team were going to rescue her. And there was a back staircase, and there was a few wonky steps that would crease. So they're going up the staircase, and, they're hitting that bad step. And then the one behind is saying, gesturing, don't step on that one. So when they're coming back down, my beta reader, Pammy, had said, you said it was this step, and then when they were coming down, it was a different step. And I'm sitting there saying, okay, I'm fully amazed, as you call that.
Fix those wonky steps is the moral of the story.
Oh, yeah.
Good to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
The 28th book is called what?
Death in a Perfect Village.
When can we expect its conclusion?
It will be coming out this summer.
Very good.
Yes.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you. And I will come back with shiny copies.
Very nice. Deborah Hammond, we hit the top of the hour. This is Talk Radio, WNR Martinsburg and TV 10.